Hi, everyone. Welcome to Historically Speaking, an online YouTube history channel focused on the history of various institutions and professionals, how history intersects with education, culture, gender equality, in the world around us. I'm Karen Yang, host of Historically Speaking. Today, I have with me Emma Rothberg and Mariana Brandman, who are both from the National Women's History Museum. Before we kind of dive into who they both are, I'm going to give you guys an overview over the National Women's History Museum as a whole. So, the National Women's History Museum has served as the largest online cultural institution dedicated to US women's history. As an institution, it has galvanized support for preserving, illuminating, and sharing the powerful history of women in America. And women's contributions and accomplishments, for the most part, have been overlooked and consequently omitted from mainstream culture and from textbooks. And the National Women's History Museum will help fill that void. And rather than rewriting current exhibitions at other history museums or deciding what else to fit in or what to omit in order to fit into women's history, the museum will serve to place women's history alongside current historical exhibitions. And they do that through a lot of online presence in a future physical museum to educate, inspire, empower, shape the future, and provide a complete view of American history. To cover more about our special guest today, we have Emma, who is a PhD candidate at the History Department at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Her research focuses on gender, urban, labor, and cultural history in the United States, and she's really interested in a lot of digital humanities and museums, which is perfect. That's one of my greatest passions, and expanding public awareness and knowledge of history. And she's worked at a lot of different various museums and cultural institutions, and we're just really excited to have her. Likewise, Mariana is a 2020 to 2022 National Women's History Museum predoctoral fellow in women's history, and she's also a PhD candidate in history at the University of Chicago, and her research interests include 20th century US history, women's and gender history, race, sexuality, and popular culture. And her dissertation, Take Back the Mic, The Rise of Feminist Comic Performance in American Culture, traces the work of feminist stand-up comics from the beginnings of the women's liberation movement into the 21st century. I'm really pleased to have both of you guys here. Thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the bio or to add to the message and mission of the National Women's History Museum?
No, I think that kind of pretty much covered it. And it was a wonderful introduction. And thank you so much, Karen, for having us on your channel today. We're excited to talk.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so without further ado, we're just going to kind of jump into the questions in of itself. Um, Personally, when I first encountered the National Women's History Museum, I was underdoing a National History Day project about Anna May Wong, who was like one of the first Asian American actresses to become really internationally known. And I saw like this great page on her, and I was just like super intrigued. And I'm really surprised, I guess, to learn that the National Women's History Museum currently was really much online. So with the National Women's History Museum being online, how has the history used like virtual resources to its advantage?
Yeah. So one of the great things about having such a robust online presence is that we are able to do really dynamic and interactive digital programming that is able to reach really wide audiences like you, Karen, right? You are not DC based, and you otherwise would not have been able to use our resources
100%.
if we only had that physical building.
Mhm.
So yeah, we're with our digital resources, we're able to reach really wide audiences, which means that we're much more accessible than a brick and mortar museum, which is really important to us, particularly as we try to widely share women's stories and get more people interested in acknowledging the central place of women in the history of this country and others. We're also able to do a lot of really great online programming, streaming, so that people who are all, wherever they are, they can interact with us and our content. And it's also important to us that we're able to provide educational resources and meet people where they are, so we can give them the resources and come to them, as opposed to them having to come to us, which can be really cumbersome for some schools, or just interested people. So that's a lot of what we're really passionate about as predoctoral fellows, is this digital content. We are creating a lot of it. And it's been really exciting to contribute to the mission of the museum and really help expand the types of online resources that we have so that even more people can look at them and learn from them.
100%.
Yeah, I'll just add on to the great answer Emma just gave. That it gives us both scope and flexibility. So in terms of scope, we can also reach wide audiences, but we can bring in really amazing scholars, authors, women who are out there making history, and do programming with them, whether like in person and recorded and put up online, or on a webinar, a Zoom like this one. And so we're not just limited to who can get there on that particular day for that event. And also the resources we put out for educators, education is a core part of our mission.
100%.
And the materials we put together, educators can bring those into their classrooms in a way that feels natural and makes sense to them. Field trips are obviously wonderful, but they are a hassle in some ways, and do have some obstacles. And this is a way for educators to look at, oh, here's a great lesson on Anna May Wong or on Harriet Tubman, and let me incorporate that into my curriculum. So that's how we're kind of flexible, agile.
Yeah, I really like this point of how you guys both kind of representative two different views. Like one is like being able to reach the consumer or the audience a lot, while the other one is kind of being able to bring a lot of the materials and the people and the scholars who will help tell the story and keep this message going. And I feel like being online, as the pandemic has evidently shown, has allowed a lot of like interconnection and a lot of like, as you said, physical spaces aren't necessary to do a lot of learning, or aren't really necessary to facilitate a lot of different conversations that we can easily adapt to different people from different backgrounds and circumstances. And I definitely think that is very, very interesting. And I think the National Women's History Museum utilizes that very well with all of the resources online, from what personally I've touched on as well. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, just from a kind of personal perspective as well, neither Mari or I are based in DC, which is where our offices are. So the fact that we have this online presence means that scholars like us who are not in the area are able to be a part of this amazing institution. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, for sure. Like being able to exactly just like work from different areas and have someone who's so interested in like women's history, maybe not necessarily from the DC area, and still be able to contribute to that message is really, really awesome. My second question, I guess, has to do with like spreading this message, I guess. So why do you guys think like telling the stories of women's history is so pivotal in creating equality today? And I guess how has this virtual format really aided this effort of telling these stories?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Karen. So, for so long, women have been left out of the national narrative or narratives of American history, and the museum just really aims to remedy that. We want to highlight the contributions and accomplishments of women, as well as the challenges they faced, and just really what the context of their lives were throughout American history. And just that mission itself is absolutely central to the push for equality. I can say that the more that people understand that women have always been active participants in all walks of life throughout American history, the more that they'll understand that women's stories are really integral to the American story. They're not an exception. It's not a sidetrack. It's not a little sidebar on the side of a textbook page, as sometimes it literally is. We're half the population. We're at the core of the story, and the museum aims to make that happen. So we really want the public, both male and female, to learn about the diversity of women's experiences across US history. Often the story kind of begins and even ends with white suffragists during the 19th and early 20th century. And that's an important part of the story, but it's so much bigger than that. Women's lives look so different depending on factors like their race, class, religion, where they lived in the nation, their national origins, sexual orientation. I could go on and on and on. And we want audiences to learn that, to think about all those different perspectives, that women are not a monolith. And frankly, the virtual format really gives us, as I said before, the flexibility to tell more stories. So we're not beholden to, the physical artifacts that we can acquire and display. We're just better able to incorporate a wide range of digital resources and add context and add scholarship and then share them widely. And so that part of the mission, we can't progress towards equality without understanding the different circumstances that people face and what is needed to level the playing field in certain ways. So the work we do with these digital resources to add context and elicit empathy, I think, by telling these stories and letting viewers connect with them, that helps us, everybody, understand what's needed in the path forward.
For sure.
I mean, I think the only thing that I can add to what Mariana's been saying is that with our digital resources and our mission to tell the stories of women who are both, very well known, big names, you've seen them in your textbooks, and then maybe some lesser known women who are incredibly important to know and have these really fascinating, amazing stories to tell, is our online biographies project, which Karen, you mentioned was how you first learned about Anna May Wong. And because we aren't reliant or confined by the actual physical wall space, we're able to just produce all of these biographies and get those stories out there and up there. We've got, I think, 12 pages of biographies. Mariana and I are writing at least 5 a month to add to this amazing collection. And I think that being on a digital platform, the fact that we can tell so many stories and leave them up there so that you can revisit those stories 7-10 years later is so important to promoting the mission, both the educational and the the mission of equality that the museum stands for, and contributing to all of those things that Mariana was mentioning before about making women a central part of the story as opposed to a peripheral or secondary part of the story.
For sure. I think just when you were talking about how these the online resources kind of just exist on there forever, even in the physical museum space, the wall space is very limited, and whose stories you choose to kind of put on the walls, again, I think in the National Women's History Museum's mission statement of hey, we can't exactly omit another piece of history to fit women's history in it, because that also would just be not telling someone else's story. I think that's also really true of how the online resources really aid this effort in telling everyone's story and being able to just create a wider perspective, which definitely, again, really plays into the idea that we cannot have women just be relegated to kind of the sidebar, or just kind of be oh, here's what's going on with a woman at this time, but rather than kind of integrating that story and making sure that story is accessible for a very, very, very long time, for sure.
Yeah, just to jump in about the virtual nature of it. It sounds very basic, but all those biographies we have that Emma mentioned, they'll have an additional resources section at the end, which I know when I'm writing, I have a lot of fun with that section, because, for instance, if I'm writing about a musician, I can put in links to her music, to recordings of it, and so that it can kind of come alive for the reader in that way. And that's something, it's harder to do in a physical museum, this provide the next step to other resources outside what we've provided, because the linkages that the internet offers are just so amazing.
For sure. I think so often, just in pop media and just our daily lives, we kind of scrutinize technology, or we scrutinize how much time we spend on social media, or look at these different resources. But I think that sometimes we can really utilize these kind of things for a very productive purpose. Just being able to talk about an artist and maybe see her work and be linked to her work, or be linked to an interview she's doing with some other resource, and seeing her her own words and her own interactions with telling her story can really change how we view these people and make them, again, come alive and seem much more relatable, which I think is super, super awesome, for sure. This next question, I guess, is a little more personal. I think I would just love to know who are your favorite historical women, and what attracts you to their stories so much?
Sure. I'll start with one kind of related to what we were talking, Mariana and I were talking about with the biographies, but one of the favorite biographies that I got to write recently was the one on Stacey Abrams, who is currently running for the Democratic nomination for governor in Georgia. She ran once before, and she also served in the Georgia state legislature before running for governor. But one of the reasons why I loved writing her biography and learning more about her is not only because I think personally she's incredibly inspiring. She's doing amazing work and advocacy on voting rights and getting more people to the polls, particularly people of color, which I think is such an important conversation to be having right now. But she was also just so relatable. The fact that she is this huge fan of the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I watched on repeat during pandemic. I mean, I was just the fact that I was able to see a connection with this woman who is so important to our current conversation around politics and the future of American democracy. It was just fun that I could relate to her on something more personally. So that was one of my favorite biographies to write.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. Mariana, what about you?
Yeah, I think Emma and I could talk about these stories forever, I'm sure. So the one that came to mind was a woman by the name of Dr. Sylvia Earle. When I was working on her biography, it was one that I immediately texted out to all my girlfriends of like, you have to hear her story. It's so cool. And I really enjoyed learning about these people who kind of discover a passion as kids and then just pursue it. And so Dr. Sylvia Earle, her nickname is Her Deepness. She is a marine biology expert. She holds the record for the deepest walk on the ocean floor. She got her PhD in botany back in the 1960s. And when she did it, she was one of the first scientists, to use scuba gear and to actually scuba dive to document marine life. She also kind of made news when she took part in this Smithsonian Man in Sea underwater habitat project. And when she descended 100 feet below the surface to live in this habitat, she was also 4 months pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
And so she just kind of didn't let anything stop her. She was the first woman to chair the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration and was given what I think is one of the coolest titles ever, which was National Geographic Society Explorer in Residence.
Wow.
Yeah, right. And now she still works on ocean conservation to protect biodiversity, particularly in light of the threat of climate change. So just seeing how she so tirelessly, went out for what she was interested in, even though it was unusual. It's marine plant life. But she got to scuba dive and live underwater and works to help the environment. Yeah, she's awesome.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. I love the plain diversity of the women that the National Women's History Museums, like the stories that you guys highlight, is so cool. And living underwater under like 4 months pregnant, like I can't even live underwater as like a teenager right now. That's so crazy. I love that so much, for sure. And I think just definitely like the relatability of these different women coupled with like the super cool feats that they're doing kind of also just proves every day that we can also do crazy things too and love certain things that people like, just like pop culture wise, and really be able to kind of understand that, hey, these people are not exactly just like superheroes. Like while they're doing superhero level things, we can also achieve that and enjoy some awesome TV shows along the way, for sure. Yeah. Okay, one last question. And I think this is more about like the general public and just how people who might not have heard of the National Women's History Museum before and how they can utilize the resources. So how can the general public utilize the National Women's History Museum's resources to further equality?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent and really important question, Karen. So thank you for posing it. I think just first and foremost, I would encourage people to come to our website and just see what we have. We have exhibits, we have biographies, we have classroom resources for teachers, we have recordings that are on our YouTube page in which scholars are talking about their work on that they do on women's history, or you have women themselves sharing their stories. There's resources for adults, for teenagers, for young kids. We can help you with your National History Day project, directing you to research. Yeah, but I think for the thing that I would love to leave your viewers with is that we are here with resources to help you learn more, that are going to kind of spur your curiosity, to help you think a little bit more, hopefully, about what you could still want to learn, or what you may want to learn, or the ways that we may be able to fill in some gaps that in your own knowledge. And I think the more that people learn and the more that people are aware, the harder it is to maintain unequal status. And I think that, just the first step is to go and to read and to learn, and then to say, okay, now that I have this information, what am I going to do about it? So yeah, I think just come to our website. We have amazing resources, and we would love to share them with you and for you to learn from them.
100%. I love that so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just echo Emma in saying, check out our resources and then share them with friends and family. We have materials about athletes, artists, scientists, but all the way to things like roller derby or women brewing beer. I think as you look at our resources, you can see, my uncle would find that interesting, or my classmate, would really be into this person's story. So sharing it, I really want to emphasize that it's not just for girls. I think that, getting young boys particularly to read some of these stories is really going to be helpful to seeing just what women have been doing throughout history. We really want to inspire younger generations.
100%.
And yeah, it's just about understanding these stories and learning, the things that we're going through today. People have been through them in the past. Let's see what they did, how they fought for some of these rights, or came up against these conflicts, and what they did. So let's learn from the past to affect the future.
For sure. Like, that's one of my biggest passions about history, is that we really utilize a lot of the mistakes or the things that people have learned in the past to kind of push for new growth and push for new change. And I definitely think that with such a great just like variety and perspectives and resources, the National Women's History Museum does a really great job of that. And I'm just really excited to have more people become aware of this awesome resource and just like learn more about it myself as well. And with that, do any of you guys have any other things you'd like to add, or any like closing remarks or anything else like that?
I guess the only thing that I will plug is that we have a lot of really awesome upcoming events, particularly in the month of April. So come to our website, see what our upcoming events are. You can register. Again, a lot of them are going to be online, and they're free to register. So we really encourage you to see if there's something that interests you and join us in that.
And I'll put like the website into the description box, so everyone should check that out. If there's nothing else, we're just going to wrap our conversation up today. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you everyone for watching. And I'll see you guys all in the next interview.